The incoming Border Czar, Tom Homan, he's saying there are 300,000 missing children in the United States. These are the unaccompanied alien children. Now, that's 300,000 who have crossed the border and they're not accounted for. And now President-elect Donald Trump, well, look, he ran on a campaign to secure the U.S. border, one of his top issues, and it seems like his incoming administration, they're going to make a first priority of locating these kids, at least according to Homan. Now, as this happens also, the battle is already beginning over these deportations of illegal immigrants from sanctuary cities. And also is now a bipartisan move to push back against the Chinese Communist Party. A push is being made to strip the CCP of a trade benefit that has until now given it special advantage even over the United States. Let me know your thoughts on this move in the comments below. Let's jump into it. We'll be talking about all these topics, so let's go, folks. Now, first off, there are over 300,000 unaccompanied children in the United States. They're unaccounted for. These are the illegal immigrant kids, right? And one of the first initiatives that's going to be taken with the incoming Trump administration will be to locate all these missing kids. This is according to recent statements from Tom Homan. He's the former acting director for ICE during Trump's first term, and he's now Trump's selection for the role of Border Czar. Now, Homan said that Trump has three main points he's going to address immediately when he comes into office. First off, mass deportations. Second off, secure the border. And three, locate the 300,000 missing children. Watch this.
He's got three rails. So we'll do the deportation operation with the priorities I just talked to you out of the gate. That'd be the priorities. Second thing is secure that border. Lock that border down and catch and release and secure the border. The third rail is we got over 300,000 missing children. Over 500,000 children have been trafficked into the United States. This administration released them to unvetted sponsors, and they can't find 300,000 of them. And based on my 3.5 decades, some of these children are in forced labor. We already found some in forced labor. Some are in forced sex trafficking. Some are living with pedophiles. We need to save these children. So that's going to be the third rail.
Now look, this isn't just some empty claim. The Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General, they issued a report on this in August. This is according to the DHS report, directly from it. It says U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, could not monitor the location and status of all unaccompanied migrant children, UCSs, or initiate removal proceedings as needed. They note further in, we learned ICE transferred more than 448,000 unaccompanied migrant children to the Department of Health and Human Services from fiscal years 2019 to 2023. However, ICE was not able to account for the location of all the unaccompanied migrant children who were released by HHS and did not appear as scheduled in immigration court. They went somewhere. And it said ICE reported more than 32,000 UCS failed to appear for their immigration court hearings from fiscal years 2019 to 2023. And as of May 2024, it says ICE had not served notices to appear on more than 291,000 UCS who therefore do not yet have an immigration court date. Now, basically, right, they're saying there are around 323,000 illegal immigrant children who are unaccompanied, in the United States, even more than that now. 32,000 who were served notices and did not appear in court, and the safety of an additional 291,000 could not be verified. And you might remember there were other documents as well coming out, other investigations, including out of Florida, looking into how they were handing off these kids to, families and so on. Some of them, for example, were just empty lots. There was no house. The addresses were empty lots, nothing there. Some of them included houses where you just had tons of these kids. Some of them included areas where there were a lot of grown men and not a lot of kids. And that was raising some concerns over, well, who are these people requesting these kids and what was the standards on handing them off, especially if the address is an empty lot. Now, of course, locating the illegal immigrant children will just be one part of a very large operation that is also going to include mass deportations. Mass deportations is still top priority with the administration. And across the United States, there's a growing network of governors and mayors who say they will not comply with these efforts. They will try to block it, while others have said that they'll selectively comply. Los Angeles, notably, they're saying they have more illegal immigrants than anywhere else in the country. They're going to try to block it. In Arizona, Governor Katie Hobbs explained her position. Watch this.
I look forward to having conversations with the incoming president about Arizona's needs, including border security. I think those same families are worried about threats from the Trump administration as well. And as I've continued to say, I will not tolerate actions that harm Arizonans, that harm our communities, and quite honestly, divert resources from providing real security at our border. I will stand up to protect Arizonans from harm by the federal government, from anyone. I'm not going to comment on hypotheticals. We don't know what a mass deportation plan will look like, what resources it will involve.
Now look, while a lot of local officials are publicly saying they're going to try to block these mass deportations, not allow them in to come and bring these people in and deport them from the country, the incoming Border Czar is issuing warnings to these officials, saying that if they block these efforts, they may be in violation of the law. He explained what the response is going to be for these officials during an interview with Fox. Watch this.
Well, first of all, if they don't want to help us get the hell out of the way, we're going to do it. If I got to send twice the amount of resources to that city, that's what we're going to do. If they would give us access to the jail, that would mean less agents in the community. For them pushing back and not letting us in the jail, it just means more agents are going to be in the community, so they're hurting themselves. Finally, I'll say this. They need to educate themselves. They need to review this. Title 8, United States Code 1324, III. Read about that and don't cross that line, because it is a felony to harbor and conceal an illegal alien from ICE. Read the statute, don't cross that line.
Now let's have a look at what the law actually says, right? This is from the Department of Justice website. This is the actual law on this from the Justice Department. It notes that Title 8 UCS 1324 defines several distinct offenses related to aliens, as in illegal immigrants, right? The technical name for them is illegal aliens. And notes that subsection 1324 prohibits alien smuggling, domestic transportation of unauthorized aliens, i.e. illegal immigrants, concealing or harboring unauthorized aliens, encouraging or inducing unauthorized aliens to enter the United States, and engaging in a conspiracy or aiding and abetting any of the preceding acts. Now look, that's a big deal, because the programs around mass illegal immigration have actually been in violation of just about every one of those. We've seen all of these. We've seen the transportation of illegal immigrants. We've seen them put up in hotels on taxpayer dollars, concealing them notably. We've absolutely seen various officials and actors encouraging and inducing illegal aliens to enter the United States, including giving signs to come into the country, including aiding it with flights and everything else, and including giving cash incentives if they come here. We've also seen groups engaging in a conspiracy, which means basically groups working in conjunction with each other to aid and abet all of these preceding acts. In other words, all of these laws are being violated, right? And it's not clear if we're going to see any criminal charges on that front, but the law is there. And most importantly, right, the part that Homan is citing, the incoming Border Czar, when it comes to officials saying they'll try to prevent ICE from carrying out deportations, this is the exact law on that from the Justice Department. This is on harboring. It says subsection 1324 makes it an offense for any person who, knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that an alien has come to, entered, or remains in the United States in violation of law, conceals, harbors, or shields from detection, or attempts to conceal, harbor, or shield from detection such alien in any place, including any building or any means of transportation. Meaning, of course, that if a public official were to shield an illegal immigrant from being deported, if they were to hide them from, again, detection, if they were to conceal them or harbor them in any way, that is a violation of this law, according to the Justice Department. Now, note that under the penalty section for these crimes, people who transport, harbor, encourage, or aid illegal immigration, they face up to 5 years in prison. And if they did this for commercial advantage or private gain, some kind of personal benefit from it, they can go to prison for up to 10 years. Now, in addition to this, it also notes there are enhanced penalties if the illegal aliens are criminals, and where an illegal alien is not presented to an immigration officer immediately upon arrival. This carries an additional 3-year minimum prison sentence. And so, again, if you block ICE from deporting a criminal alien, which sanctuary cities have been doing, that actually has a 3-year minimum sentence. A law that has just not been enforced, frankly. But what Tom Homan is suggesting is they will begin enforcing these laws, or at least he's threatening it. We'll see if anything actually happens with it. Now, speaking of criminal aliens, though, the trial of Jose Ibarra for the murder of nursing student Laken Riley, that's now come to a close. Ibarra was found guilty on all charges, and he's now been sentenced to life in prison without parole. And new details also came out in the case. Not only did he kill this young woman who struggled for her life for 18 minutes, it also now turns out that this illegal immigrant from Venezuela is a member of the Tren de Aragua gang and was getting various benefits on taxpayer dollars. New York Post said this. It said, this criminal enjoyed the taxpayer-funded flight from Kennedy Airport in Queens to Atlanta, Georgia in September 2023. New York City sources said. And it says, well, according to the Post, this move occurred fewer than 6 months before this illegal immigrant allegedly hunted down and killed Riley, a 22-year-old Augusta University nursing student in Athens during a sex attack gone horribly awry. Now, it notes that one of these individuals, Rosabelli Flores Bello, an ex-roommate of Ibarra, indicated on the stand at his murder trial in Athens on Monday that she, Ibarra, and an unknown number of others flew to Georgia after requesting a free flight while at the Roosevelt Hotel in Manhattan. It notes the Roosevelt had been established as a temporary migrant intake center by the city, which was drowning in waves of migrants flooding the Big Apple daily. And to try to help ease the crisis, New York City set up a so-called reticketing center, they referred to it as, in October 2023, that provided migrants with federally funded one-way plane tickets anywhere in the world. In other words, taxpayer dollars, your money, because this was federal and also state, your money was used to house the murderer, and taxpayer dollars were used to fly him to the location where he then murdered Laken Riley while she was out on a jog. And look, meanwhile, back to New York, President-elect Donald Trump is also facing sentencing over the 34 counts of him, allegedly falsifying business records. And there's now a new update on this case. I'll be talking about this after we come back from a quick break. We'll be back in less than a minute, so don't go anywhere.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. President-elect Donald Trump is now facing this 34 charges of falsifying business records, and he's going to be sentenced. It's not clear how this is going to work, but in New York, they're talking about this. Now, right now, prosecutors, they're looking to delay the sentencing until after Donald Trump leaves office as president. Fox News said this. New York prosecutors are requesting a stay until at least 2029 in New York v. Trump as the president's defense attorneys prepare to move to dismiss the case entirely. Now, notice that this judge, Juan Merchan, granted the request, which issues a stay on all deadlines, including the November 26 sentencing date, to consider the effect of his election as president. Now, Trump's legal team, they're trying to challenge the case still. They're aiming to get it thrown out entirely. And the incoming Trump team, they're also suggesting that they're going to be investigating whether there's been instances of weaponized justice, the politicization of the justice system, and if things like this have anything to do with that. And on that note as well, right, that effort might have just got stalled a bit. Trump's pick for Attorney General, that's former Florida Representative Matt Gaetz, he has now officially withdrawn from the nomination. Now, this takes place as he's been facing threats that various House ethics complaints against him could be released publicly. And Gaetz announced his withdrawal in a post on X. Have a look at this. He said, "I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of Trump/Vance transition. There was no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ, Department of Justice, must be in place and ready on day one." And now he is now not just out of the nomination for, again, Attorney General. He's also out of the House of Representatives. There is talk right now, because remember, Marco Rubio is being pulled from the Senate to go and work the Trump administration, notably as Secretary of State. And that means that Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida can appoint now a new senator. There is talk that they may appoint Gaetz as a senator. It's not clear whether that will happen, but that is part of the discussion right now. Now, on another note, Trump has now nominated Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to be U.S. Attorney General. Here's part of his post on Truth Social announcing the nomination. He says this: "Pam was a prosecutor for nearly 20 years where she was very tough on violent criminals and made the streets safe for Florida families. Then as Florida's first female attorney general, she worked to stop the trafficking of deadly drugs and reduce the tragedy of fentanyl overdose deaths, which have destroyed many families across our country. She did such an incredible job that I asked her to serve on our Opioid and Drug Abuse Commission during my first term. We saved many lives." Now, it's not clear what her stance will be in terms of going with Trump's agenda on, going after weaponized justice. Gaetz, again, was one of the more firebrands publicly on that, but we'll see. Again, Pam Bondi did work in the first Trump administration, and Trump seems to believe in her very much. Now, in other news, not all issues in Congress are divisive. It does seem that one of the big topics that has support from both Republicans and Democrats is pushing back against the Chinese Communist Party. And now they're talking about something pretty interesting. They're talking about a key effort that would strip the Chinese Communist Party of a trade benefit that has until now given the CCP a special advantage over American companies. This would disrupt the entire CCP economy because they've been basically living on American welfare because of the special trade status. Epoch Times says this: "An independent federal agency is recommending that lawmakers strip the Chinese regime of its trade privileges with the United States, ending what is known as permanent normal trade relations status, which Beijing has enjoyed for more than 20 years. In its annual report to Congress released on November 19th, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission offered 32 recommendations, and for the first time, it called for revoking China's PNTR status, this special trade status, previously known as the most favored nation status. And notes the preferred trading status opened the U.S. market to Chinese products with trade advantages such as reduced tariffs." And they said, quote, "This move would signal a shift toward a more assertive trade policy aimed at protecting U.S. industries and workers from economic coercion," the commission said, adding that the Chinese regime should not benefit from the same trade terms as U.S. allies, given its malpractices such as intellectual property theft and market manipulation. Now, it's the commission explained that implementing this change would allow the United States to reinstate annual reviews of the Chinese regime's trade practices and thus gain more leverage to deal with its unfair trade behaviors. Now, basically, the Chinese Communist Party has been given various, special benefits for trade, and these have allowed the CCP to undercut American businesses on trade deals. Now, removing this would force the CCP onto a much more even playing field. If you're an American company and you want to sell into China, there's tons of just blockades, tons of things that stop you from doing it. But if a Chinese company wants to sell in America, the door is wide open and they can even undercut American businesses on price because they get all these special benefits. Removing this would even the playing field. Removing this would make it so the CCP cannot compete like it used to. And again, this would just be one part of a very large expanding trade war. Remember as well, President-elect Donald Trump previously proposed imposing a universal 10 to 20% tariff on all goods entering the United States. And interestingly, the CCP would get even a bigger one. He wants to have a 60 to 100% levy on Chinese imports, which would be a very big deal. That means, of course, that they would their economy would very likely go even more belly up, as it's already doing. Now, with that said, the incoming Trump administration has many officials who will very likely be very tough on the Chinese Communist Party as well. For example, Trump picked Representative Mike Waltz to serve as his national security advisor. Representative Waltz is a vocal critic of the Chinese Communist Party and having been vocal on Beijing's espionage and human rights abuses. In 2021, he even released a video on social media platform X saying the Chinese Communist Party is, quote, the biggest threat America has ever faced. Now, Trump has also picked Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, and Senator Rubio is also known as a China hawk. Epoch Times said this: as the vice-ranking member on the Select Committee on Intelligence and senior member of the Committee on Foreign Relations, Rubio has been pressing for a harder line toward human rights violators such as China, the CCP. His lawmaking draws on a tough-on-China approach, placing countering the Chinese regime as a top priority, while calling out Beijing's ambition to topple the United States and dominate the world through trade theft and coercion. And notes as well, he recently called out global consulting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers for appeasing communist China by providing services to Xinjiang authorities amid ongoing human rights abuses against Uyghur Muslims. And he also supported Chinese geopolitical ambitions and they also, again, were supporting Chinese geopolitical ambitions and undercut American interests, things that he was opposing, of course. Now, I note that a measure he led in the Senate called the Falun Gong Protection Act, which has already passed the House, also aims to sanction perpetrators of forced organ harvesting who are targeting practitioners of the persecuted faith. Meaning, of course, not only are they going after the CCP on the trade front, they're going after the CCP on the human rights abuse front. And look, in other news, we've talked before about the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to target New York-based performing arts company Shenyun, and how the CCP's efforts, interestingly, have odd overlap with a recent series of hit pieces from the New York Times, also attacking the performing arts company using shoddy journalistic practices. Well, look, now a Chinese agent, a CCP agent, has been sentenced to prison as part of the regime's efforts to try to attack Shenyun. Epoch Times said this: a Chinese agent who tried to bribe the IRS and manipulate the agency into advancing Beijing's transnational repression of a U.S. nonprofit has received a 20-month prison sentence. U.S. citizen John Chen, 72, was a principal actor in a $50,000 bribery scheme under the direction of a Chinese intelligence official to revoke the nonprofit status of New York-based Shenyun Performing Arts. And as Shenyun has long been on the Chinese regime's target list, founded in 2006, the company tours around the world to display the ancient Chinese culture that prevailed before the communist takeover of China, while highlighting the human rights abuses under the regime's rule. It has often drawn attention to the ongoing persecution of the meditation group Falun Gong. It notes as well, for several months in 2023, Chen, the guy who just got sentenced, had been trying to move a fraudulent whistleblower complaint to help the Chinese Communist Party, quote, topple Falun Gong, according to court documents. And as a prosecutor said, the whistleblower complaint was facially deficient and invoked propaganda rhetoric typical of Chinese authorities. Chen and other co-conspirator Lin Feng, who served 16 months of detention, paid $5,000 cash bribes to an undercover agent posing as an IRS agent. They promised an additional $50,000 for opening an investigation, along with 60% of any awards from the complaint if it went through. And look, this appears to be part of a larger effort the Chinese Communist Party is rolling out right now. The CCP is doing this. We again got leaked documents saying they're doing this. There are even some YouTubers tied in with this, which the CCP has openly named in some of these documents. And again, New York Times launching these hit pieces. One of those YouTubers tied in with these CCP documents said publicly on X that he was actually the main source for the New York Times. We'll see how this all unfolds, but again, it seems there's a lot going on right now with this. But look, in other news, it seems that Russia is open to negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. And Vladimir Putin has said he's open to Trump's peace plan with some exceptions. Newsweek said, Russian President Vladimir Putin has indicated he is open to negotiating a ceasefire in Ukraine with incoming U.S. President Donald Trump, but remains firm on critical conditions, reported Reuters news agency. It said Putin has ruled out any significant territorial concessions and demands that Kiev, Ukraine, abandon its NATO member ambitions. Now look, there were mixed reports also on whether Russia actually launched an intercontinental ballistic missile the other day. Ukraine has claimed it was an ICBM. There are different analysts looking at the videos of this alleged attack and saying it does look like one. Other sources have questioned it. On this, some analysts I've been looking at, they suggested what Russia did was launch an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, which can be used to carry a nuclear warhead. This one did not have a nuclear warhead on it, but they've been threatening that. What they did instead was put a type of tip on it that would simulate the exact weight of a nuclear warhead, suggesting and demonstrating that they could do it if they wanted to. They accompanied that with cruise missile strikes. The cruise missiles were intercepted. The ICBM allegedly was not, although they say it did cause minimum damage. It looked like it was more trying to send a message. But look, Putin's new statements that he is open to a peace plan with Trump, this does suggest that the threats of nuclear war may be on hold for a bit. And as I've been suggesting, again, I think this is more about trying to get cards to play for the upcoming negotiations. Ukraine, again, was recently given permission from the Biden administration to launch deep strikes into Russia. Russia said that's a red line that could result in nuclear war, and they seem to have made a very clear threat on that. But Putin now coming out saying he's open to peace deal. A peace deal suggests they're more looking to peace than nuclear war. We'll see how this turns out, folks, but that said, let's jump into some questions. Let's see here. Again, if you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat. And also, please don't forget to hit the like button. It does help us quite a bit, especially with the algorithms, actually. All right, Idaho Rocks, you're saying we need to build factories in the U.S. to make products imported from China before we blow up that supply source. Yeah, I'd agree, actually. But what's interesting is that that's already been ongoing to an extent. When they talk about de-risking, this has basically been going on since the beginning of COVID-19. Because what happened with COVID, the Chinese Communist Party was doing rolling lockdowns. And so supplies from China were largely cut off during COVID. And because supplies from China were cut off during COVID, the US and other countries already had to look for other sources. Now, it doesn't mean we're manufacturing all that stuff here in the United States, and there definitely are some things that still mostly only come from China. They are moving to do that, but I'd agree actually that they do need to start looking at domestic production. Even on the military front, though, they're talking about that. And that it's actually a bipartisan thing. It's not just Republicans saying it. Democrats are saying it too. In fact, Biden has actually been advancing a lot of that. He has maintained Trump's tariffs against the Chinese Communist Party. He's expanded some of that, including with sanctions. He's gone after some of the human rights abuses there, mostly around like the Muslim Uyghurs and slave labor. But they are talking about, they don't call it decoupling. Decoupling meaning we just totally break from China. They're saying de-risking, meaning we're removing the risk of being intertwined with them were their economy to collapse or if a war were to break out. And they're noting that especially when it comes to the defense front. Remember a while back there was that big defense report saying that if America were to go to war with China right now, we would lose. As Idaho Rocks is noting, the big basis of that, why we would lose, was mostly because it would break our supply chains and we lack domestic manufacturing. And so as a matter of national security, they're saying that we need to begin domestic manufacturing and get these domestic supply chains in place, or we do risk losing a war. And again, look, we're on track to getting in a big war right now unless something changes. China's talking about invading Taiwan by 2027. And look at the state of the world right now. If a peace deal is not made, we are on the road to a world war, another world war. Jerry McFadden, you're saying, forget the proposed 87K IRS agents. We need 87K more ICE agents temporarily. Yeah, remember that? They were, of course, hiring and expanding the IRS. On that note, I don't know if you all saw this, but Elon Musk, remember Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have now been appointed to lead a new department, the Department of Government Efficiency. Vivek Ramaswamy is talking about possibly getting rid of entire government agencies. And Elon Musk just had a tweet and a poll asking people, should we get rid of the IRS and replace it with a standardized tax system? Basically, this is something that Trump's been talking about as well, is that we can create kind of a standardized tax system that's very easy to follow. Trump's talking about launching a government-run, tax app. Many of you might use these, every time it's tax season, you might use these different online systems where you can type in your data and it basically files your taxes for you. Trump's been talking about creating a government app that does that, so you wouldn't need to use these outside sources, and also to simplify the tax system so that it's much more simple. You don't have to go through these long processes. It's much more easy to file your tax returns. And Elon Musk is suggesting that we could simplify the tax system and make the IRS unnecessary. Now, whether they'll do that or not, who knows? Yeah, flat tax, Idaho Rocks. That's what they're calling it, a flat tax. Who knows whether they'll do that? It's not clear whether they would. It might just be Elon Musk, just starting a very excited debate on the internet. But they are talking about it. It actually is part of the discussion right now. And on Jerry McFadden's note of needing more ICE agents, they might need it temporarily. They are talking about using local law enforcement. They're talking about using the military. It is likely that ICE, in its current capacity, would not be able to carry out the operation of deporting all these illegal immigrants at the scale that they're saying they want to, using their current force structure. And so they would need more people. It's not clear, again, whether just ICE will handle this. They have suggested military involvement and local law enforcement involvement. Let's see here. Gina Mikulik, you're saying enforce the law. All of the NGOs that are aiding and abetting illegal aliens should be investigated. Yeah, and I've talked about this before too. When it comes to the system of mass illegal immigration into the United States, this is not an organic system. When you watch these migrant caravans, they call them, right, begin in different parts of Latin America, and you see them marching on the street and gaining in force, there are actually groups like activist organizations throughout Latin America that organize those. There are key figures involved in the organizing and movement of those operations. The United States is also a signatory on the Global Compact for Migration, which actually began as a New York plan. The Global Compact for Migration, which is a United Nations agreement, is one of the agreements that facilitates what they call, safe and orderly migration. And that includes a fund which comes from taxpayer dollars in the United States and actually other countries. Europe's part of it as well. And that fund goes into creating the entire network all through Latin America, which includes various services, the cash handouts, the operations to ensure the safe and orderly mass migration, sign-up programs where they can sign up for various benefits to aid and abet them as they travel to the United States. And then, of course, at various points, there are actual criminal organizations involved, for example, in Nicaragua, which is not a signatory on this, and so the people traveling need to use actual human traffickers. And then, of course, at the U.S.-Mexico border, where the cartels handle some of the checkpoints. Cartels are actually part of this at some junctures along the border, which has made human trafficking just a booming business. Human trafficking is a booming business right now because of this. Once they get into the United States, the operations are then handled through various groups. If they want to apply for amnesty or get on the list for that, they have to use the CBP One app, Customs Border Protection One app through the U.S. government, where they can get flights directly into the United States, or they can schedule to turn themselves in at a border checkpoint. What happens is they move them to what they call processing facilities. The processing facilities are handled in conjunction with Border Patrol and Department of Homeland Security. They do the checks on them, they get them registered in the system, they give them parole, and then they're handed off to the NGOs, which then fly them or whatever else all around the United States, and then set them up for various social services like welfare and free housing and everything else. But the ones that don't go through that are also put through a system run by NGOs, non-governmental organizations, which run bus systems where they bus them all around the country and then also get them enrolled in various programs. So they get free housing and free food and free cash handouts to cover their basic needs and everything else. And so, there's a very, very large-scale program with this. On the other side of it, the technical legal language suggests that this is unauthorized aliens, right? The legal statement is unauthorized alien. And from a legal perspective, the argument from the other side is very likely going to be these people were authorized, not unauthorized, because they do still claim that they're not going to support the people who, skip the line, the big line they created, and just try to illegally enter. They still don't really deport them, and they could still face criminal charges or investigations, as Tom Homan, the incoming Border Czar, is suggesting, if they aid, abet, or give shelter to or whatever else, or conceal these individuals from being deported. That could still be a very large crime. And if these NGOs are working with actual illegal aliens, and not just the ones who are being let in through this whole system they established, which would mean they are authorized, not unauthorized, then that, of course, would be a crime as well, technically. It's not clear whether people would actually face criminal charges for this, but they are suggesting it. And the big issue, though, is that by the very nature of what they call sanctuary cities or sanctuary states, what they're doing is, what that really means typically is they're preventing illegal alien criminals from being deported. And as I noted in the Justice Department law, if you prevent an illegal alien criminal, someone who has committed a crime, from being deported, that's a 3-year minimum prison sentence. We have not seen that enforced in the United States, but they could enforce it. And as Tom Homan is suggesting, even some of these local officials could face criminal charges, at least that's what he's threatening, if they continue doing this. Now, these might just be empty threats. That's totally possible. I don't think we've seen really local officials get criminally charged like that before. Some of that's going to be on the Justice Department, and again with the Attorney General. We'll see what happens. It's possible this is just empty talk, but we'll see what happens, right? Let's see here. Ashley from California, you're saying, I understand state rights, but isn't immigration a national security threat, making it a federal matter? Yeah, and so is border security. Now remember, this was actually one of the arguments the Biden administration was using. Remember when Arizona was trying to put up a border barrier? Remember when they were putting up border barriers and they were using, I believe it was like shipping containers? The Biden administration sued them and then made them tear down the barriers. Same thing in Texas. Remember when they put up different buoy systems to block people from crossing the Rio Grande, and they were saying it's a human rights abuse and so on. They put up barbed wire, and then they did all these photo ops of people and little kids go climbing under the barbed wire to illegally enter the United States. Remember when they were doing that? The Biden administration sued Texas over that. And the basis of those lawsuits was that it is not a state right to manage the border. The states were arguing that because the federal government has been delinquent on border security, that they have necessitated the states to enforce their own laws. And then Texas, again, they lost that lawsuit as well because technically it is on the federal government. Technically, border security is on the federal government, not on the states. And of course, that's why ICE is federal. That's why Border Patrol is federal. That's why these operations to deport people is federal, not state. The way they got around that, like Texas, for example, and other states have suggested they might follow along, is they tried, and they faced federal lawsuits on this as well, but they tried suggesting that within Texas law, they made it a crime to cross the Texas border illegally from a foreign country. And so they made illegal entry from a foreign country a local law, a violation of a local law, which would allow them to, basically prosecute people. And so that's kind of the legal battle that's been going on around this. But on Ashley from California's point, yes, there are state rights, but there are limits to state rights, right? And as she noted, immigration is a national security issue, and it is a federal matter. And on that note, too, managing the border is actually a federal responsibility. And again, with Trump now coming in, he's going to be doing the opposite of what the previous administration has been doing, it seems, on this. Although, funny enough, the Biden administration has been saying that they've been very tough on the border. It's actually funny. I've done some interviews on this before. It's actually interesting if you look at political language, because political language often shows what the political parties believe voters care about based on polling. Now, what have you noticed within the political debates around border security? The Biden administration, they're not, when they were on the campaign trail, right, when Kamala Harris was running for president, they weren't talking about open borders. They weren't talking about the CBP-1 app. They weren't talking about the Global Compact for Migration. I don't think they try to talk about that at all. They try to say it doesn't exist, right? They try to pretend it's not there. They try to make it sound like it's Texas's fault and Florida's fault for busing people around the country, not mentioning that they're flying people on taxpayer-funded flights, for example. Now, why would that be the case? Why would they not want to talk about taxpayer-funded operations to facilitate mass migration? It's probably because even though they're doing it, they know that voters don't want it. They know that it does not have popular support. And so rather than try to promote it, they say the opposite. They were saying that Kamala Harris was very strong on the border. They denied that she was the border czar. That was technically a name they gave her. It wasn't a position. Trump kind of made it a position now by calling Tom Homan the border czar. That's his official title, which was not a title prior to this, which seems kind of like almost a slap in the face because they called Kamala the border czar. One of the things she was doing was she was traveling to different parts of Latin America and negotiating deals on like safe migration, and you could argue some of that was creating a more safe pathway, not for illegal immigration, but facilitated legal mass migration. And that's kind of been where the language differs, right? Now, the Democrats would say, we're very tough on border security. We shut down the border, actually, and they have, right? They technically have very strong security, But the issue is they're facilitating mass migration. They actually have created systems to allow in just millions upon millions upon millions of people using legal pathways. And so it's actually a debate not over the number of people they're letting in, but instead the technical definition of whether these are illegal immigrants or migrants. That's the actual area of debate. But they don't say it publicly, right? But my point is, if you look at the language they've had, if they believed that this was popular with voters, they would have promoted what they've done. The fact that they did not talk publicly about the real nature of these operations, at least to me, suggests that they believe it is not popular with voters. And getting to the point of what we could be watching, I think the Trump administration is going to have a lot more support for this than many people may realize. Without a doubt, you're going to have a lot of pushback. But actually, there is a lot of public support for this. Ryan Kane, you're saying lots of good alternatives to China, such as Mexico, Vietnam, Philippines, etc. Yeah, without a doubt. The old benefit of manufacturing in China was cheap labor. These days, it's not cheap to manufacture there anymore. The benefits of running a business in China these days, it's more because a lot of companies want to have access to the China market. Access to like 1.3 billion people, right? They see that as the benefit. Hollywood wants to get in there because they want the movies to be seen by all the Chinese people. Microsoft, they kind of got pushed out, but they wanted to be there because they wanted to sell Windows and they wanted to get on all the government computers and so on, which the CCP is blocked, by the way. They can't do that anymore. American companies like Tesla, they want to sell their products in China. And so the CCP has various laws restricting foreign companies. If you want to go to China and you're a tech company, you got to hand them your intellectual property. Like you have to give them your source code. The CCP then takes what they hand them and they create duplicate products under a different brand and then compete with the American company until they can kick them out of the country and then dominate the market and then compete with that company outside of China using the stolen intellectual property. Now look, you can only do that to people so many times before they start saying, well, gee, I feel like you keep robbing me and then you sell the thing you stole from me on the market and undercut me on bids. I don't think I want to be here anymore. And not only that, because of the national security laws and the anti-espionage laws in China, they're actually going after a lot of American businessmen. And so it's very dangerous to do business in China right now because of the way the CCP is doing these types of things. And so and then not to mention the ongoing COVID lockdowns, which the CCP has done just on a rolling basis, and the nature of the CCP getting involved with this war with Russia and Ukraine and also Israel and Gaza. The CCP is backing Palestine and backing a lot of the, Iran and stuff like that. The CCP is kind of taken the other side of that war as well. Because of the global conflict, a lot of businesses, even aside from everything else, they're saying, well, look, China's getting sanctioned, China's getting hit with tariffs, and not even just from the US, it's from a lot of countries. It's becoming too dangerous to do business there. And the benefit that used to exist, that, hey, cheap manufacturing, that's off the table. It's not cheap to manufacture there anymore. It'll be cheaper to go to Thailand or Vietnam or Mexico or whatever else, or the Philippines for that matter, and you don't have to deal with all the crazy politics. Not as much, at least. You still have to deal with some crazy politics, but not as much. The cheap manufacturing is off the table. The trade benefits, like most favored nation trading status, that might get canceled. On top of that, there's the currency wars, and there's also issues when it comes to, again, the CCP possibly facing tariffs and sanctions, which make it way more expensive. Then there's the crazy politics and the human rights abuses and everything else the companies get intertangled with when they're doing business there. And so a lot of them have been pulling out. A lot of them are looking to other countries. Now, that doesn't mean all the manufacturing is coming back to the United States. Again, in terms of U.S. manufacturing, we're not getting all of that. But America is talking about, or at least Trump's talking about, more trade tariffs, minimum like 10, 20% on all foreign goods, and using tariffs to replace most of our taxes. Maybe getting rid of income tax for a large number of Americans, using tariffs as the replacement for it. Some note that tariffs represent a type of hidden tax on goods, notably just on imported goods. Who knows if that'll take place? But that's a suggestion. And so, yeah, we are watching a global shift in terms of the global economy. And the Chinese Communist Party, I've been saying it for a while, I think they could go belly up real quick. I think it's amazing they've lasted this long. And I would personally say they've only lasted this long because of the amount of foreign investment they were getting, which artificially propped them up, especially during COVID. But that's over now, Gene Engman, you're saying, why are there so many children coming across the border unattended? In other words, where are their parents? There's a couple answers to that. One of the answers is sometimes the parents or family are already in the United States and they're trying to bring them here. When I was investigating the border crisis, remember I went down to Panama, I went to Mexico, I've been all along the U.S. border, the U.S.-Mexico border. You've all seen the videos, I assume. I actually talked to some people who, and I met a young Chinese girl, for example. She was crying. She hadn't eaten for a while. It was pretty sad, honestly. She said she never wanted to come. She never wanted to do this, but her mom made her do it. And she said that basically it was because, her family was forcing her to do it because they wanted her to come here to the United States and then basically get set up and then bring them over. And then she was the able-bodied one, and she would be the one to do it. She wasn't like a little kid. She was like, she looked like she was about 17 or 18. I don't know how old she was, but you do find cases like that. Sometimes it's, again, because they're just trying to get their family members here and they want to get the kid in because the kid gets different treatment with Customs Border Protection and different treatment when it comes to these different laws. It's easier to get a kid in than it is an adult. And so they'll send the kids because they're more likely going to get in and more likely going to be able to facilitate the whole family coming in once they get chain migration. That's part of it. Another one is human traffickers use kids, and human traffickers use kids specifically because the kids work as like a special passport. If you have a kid with you, you get better treatment. If you have a kid with you, you're more likely going to be let in. And so the human traffickers, they actually traffic children. They'll kidnap them. They'll kidnap the kids. I talked to a woman who was saying that in one of the towns in Mexico, the cartels, the human traffickers, they were going around house to house, and they would tell people, "Hey, we're going to take your kid, and if you stop us, we're going to slit that kid's throat right in front of you." And they were doing that. The cartels were doing that. And so they were kidnapping these children, and then the traffickers used the kids as like the passport system to facilitate, illegal immigration. That was happening, and that was the exact word. They threatened to cut the kid's throat right in front of the mom, if the parents didn't let the cartels just take the kid. So what are you going to do, right? Well, I have two choices. Either my kid gets murdered right in front of me, or they get kidnapped, and maybe I'll see them again in the future once the cartels don't need them anymore. Like, what are you going to do, right? Remember that when Trump put in the child separation policy, remember that whole narrative, where if people came across with a child, they would take them, separate them briefly, and do DNA tests to make sure that people were actually the family members. It was for that reason. That was the actual reason they were doing that, is because they were trying to stop human traffickers from kidnapping and using children for the purpose of human trafficking. And they've even come out recently. In fact, I was going to include it today. They came out recently and said that they're finding a lot of the kids are drugged. So the traffickers will drug the kids. "Oh, my sick child, I need to come in, my sick child." The kid's been drugged. They can't separate them because they got rid of that policy. They can't DNA test them because they got rid of that policy. And so it works for the traffickers. Then they just recycle the kid, or they bring them into the U.S. and they become one of these 300,000 missing kids. And who knows what they've done with them. Tom Homan has suggested that some of them have been put into slave labor. Tom Homan has said that it's likely a lot of these kids are being used as slaves in the United States. And yeah, that's been going on, and for some reason, that's not as much of a human rights issue as facilitating mass migration, right? Let's see, Alfred's mom, you're saying the government has a pattern of expanding, in one more category. Some people who are like 20, 30 years old, they'll just lie and say that they're like 17 or 8 or 17 or like 16 years old because they want to get labeled as a child. That was one of the big things in Europe especially, where you have like all these unaccompanied children are coming to our country. We have to house them and feed them. And it's like a 27-year-old like former terrorist or something. You know what I mean? Like they were not kids in many instances. It was like dudes, it was grown men saying they were kids. That's also been a big issue. And because one of the issues is they just discard their identities. They get rid of their passports, they get rid of their driver's licenses, and they can say whatever name they want, they can say whatever country of origin they want, and they can say whatever age they want. And the authorities checking them in just have to go by whatever they say. That's also the way it's been working. Alfred's mom, you're saying the government has a platform of expanding programs into bureaucracies. Has a pattern of expanding programs into bureaucracies. Yeah, I saw a quote recently. I think it was from Thomas Sowell, which said basically that a bureaucracy is when efficiency is when process becomes more important than outcome, where the focus is on the process, not in terms of creating an outcome that is beneficial to people. Bureaucracy is expanding the process, right? That is kind of the definition of it. You have a process for doing something. Oftentimes it's step 1 to step 2, a 2-point process, very simple, right? Like a standardized tax system. 1, 2, you're done. A bureaucracy is when you create all these middlemen. And so instead of a 2-point system, you have a 10-point system, and you have to jump through all these people. I mentioned that I grew up kind of all over the place. I've lived across the whole country, and I moved around a lot as a kid. I went to like 3 high schools. I went to 3 community colleges. I did homeschool. I was all over the place. But I used to live in the winters because my dad used to surf all the time. He'd travel and surf. We had a house in Costa Rica on the Osa Peninsula because there's fantastic waves there. There's really good waves. We were in an area called Montepalo. One issue they have in Costa Rica, and I'm not Costa Rican, we just went there to surf, but one thing they have there is they have in their constitution, I believe it is, required employment, the right to employment. So everybody is basically, as a human right, offered a job. The result of that is they have the most ridiculous jobs you can imagine. Like you'll have, like in some of these countries, you'll have like the government bureaucrat who operates the stapler. We can't staple these documents because our official stapler operator is on lunch break right now. And then you have to go to like the official stamp operator, because like they've created a job on such a bureaucratic level where every single step is handled by like a different person because they need employment, right? You have that in some countries. Some would actually argue the unions work like this. Is somebody who does video, and I do documentaries, as you've all seen, of course. If you talk to some of the union guys, they'll note that if you work in some areas where you have union workers, like for films and stuff like that, they'll have requirements even where you're not allowed to like if I want to move maybe not a laptop, but like a banner or something like that, if I want to move it from here to here, only a union member is allowed to do that. Not a laptop, but like other things. And so they create bureaucracies, which makes it so that you have to hire them, right? They create these bureaucracies so that instead of 1 to 2, you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, to get something done. And so the process expands to the point where the system can barely move. And that is the concern of creating more government jobs rather than creating more government efficiency, right? And I think that's the debate we're having right now with, for example, Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency. And people are pointing to, you know, Milton Friedman, talking about that they're achieving Milton Friedman's view of a government that's more focused on efficiency, that you don't have needless steps within a process. Simplified, streamlined process that cuts out all the fat. Now, that also means less government jobs, and that means less employment. That means more people have to do normal work, not government work. And so, you know, depending on where you stand on that, that's either a good thing or a bad thing, right? Have your opinion. But, you know, a lot of government jobs are very good jobs, actually. And so losing that will mean a lot of people might lose their jobs. That's just the reality of it. And that means that there'll need to be more private enterprise, which means people need to, you know, there's questions on how people are going to do that, because not everybody has an entrepreneurial nature, and not everybody wants to go work some random job like, you know, working at Starbucks or something like that. You know, not everybody wants to have those kinds of jobs either. So there's also the issue of employment. Folks, that said, and I'm always looking at the chat, of course. That said, it's Friday, so have a good weekend. We have Thanksgiving coming up pretty soon. Have a good weekend, folks. I always enjoy talking with y'all. Please don't forget to like and share this video. At the very least, like it. It helps us a lot. And also, again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.